I sacrificed my own financial stability for 3 years, sending $2,000 monthly to keep my parents afloat, only to be humiliated at Thanksgiving dinner while my sister took credit for saving the family. One question exposed their fraud, and the screams that followed haunt me still. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I shouldn't have even been there. That was the thought looping through my mind, keeping time with the throbbing headache that had settled behind my left eye 3 days ago and refused to leave. My doctor had called it adrenal fatigue bordering on total systemic collapse. I called it life as a senior forensic accountant during a triple merger audit season. I was physically shattered, my skin pale and clammy, my stomach churning with a nausea that stress and anxiety had made my constant companions. But it was Thanksgiving. And in my family, you didn't skip Thanksgiving unless you were in a coma. And even then, my mother, Mary, would probably prop you up at the table with a turkey leg in your hand. I had driven 4 hours to get to my parents' house, stopping twice to dry heave on the side of the highway. I was exhausted. I was vulnerable. I just wanted a hot meal and a little bit of validation that the sacrifices I'd made for them were worth it. The house looked good. Too good. The front lawn, usually a patch of dying crabgrass, was manicured. The peeling paint I had offered to pay a contractor to fix last summer had been freshly coated in a pristine, creamy white. It looked like a home that wasn't struggling, which gave me a momentary sense of relief. At least the money is helping, I told myself. At least they are okay. I walked inside, expecting the smell of sage and roasting poultry. Instead, I was greeted by the sound of my father, Andrew, booming with laughter. A sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "There she is," Andrew shouted, but his eyes slid right past me to the person standing behind me in the doorway. My sister, Mia. Mia swept in, trailing expensive perfume, and her husband, Patrick, who was hauling a massive pile of boutique shopping bags. I stood there, holding my store-bought pumpkin pie and my overnight bag, feeling like a ghost in my own childhood home. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," I said, my voice raspy. Andrew barely nodded at me. "Move your bag, Scarlett. You're blocking the hallway. Mia needs space to put her things down." I swallowed the hurt, stepping aside. I watched my mother, Mary, rush out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She hugged Mia so hard I thought she might crack a rib. She hugged Patrick. Then she looked at me, her smile faltering just a fraction, her eyes darting nervously to the side. "Oh, Scarlett, you made it. You look tired." "I am tired, Mom," I said, hoping for a shred of sympathy. "Work has been." "Well, don't just stand there," Andrew interrupted, clapping Patrick on the back. "Come on in. We were just making a toast before we sit down. You're late, Scarlett, as usual." I wasn't late. I was 10 minutes early. But I didn't have the energy to argue. I followed them into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the stuff we were never allowed to touch growing up. There were crystal goblets, a centerpiece that must have cost $200, and bottles of wine that I knew retailed for $50 a pop. I sat at my designated spot, the wobbly chair near the kitchen door. Andrew stood at the head of the table, raising his glass. The room went silent. He looked at Mary, then at Patrick, and finally, his gaze settled lovingly on Mia. "I want to give thanks," Andrew began, his voice thick with emotion. "This year has been hard. We almost lost everything. But we didn't, and that is thanks to one person." I straightened up slightly. I didn't want a parade, but a nod would be nice. I had wired them $72,000 over the last 36 months. I had decimated my savings. I had put off buying my own condo. I had done it all silently, dutifully. "To Mia," Andrew said, raising his glass higher. "Your sister is the only reason we're still afloat. She stepped up when it mattered. She saved this family." I froze, the air left my lungs. "And you, Scarlett?" Andrew turned his gaze on me, his eyes cold and hard as stones. "You've done nothing. You sit in the city with your fancy degree, ignoring us while your sister sacrifices everything. It's shameful." The room spun. The nausea I had been fighting all day surged violently, but it wasn't from the flu. It was from the knife twisting in my back. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. For a solid 10 seconds, I couldn't hear anything but the rushing of blood in my ears. It was a physical roar, like standing under a waterfall. I look. Dee around the table, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for someone to laugh and say, "Just kidding, we got your checks." But no one laughed. Mia sat there preening. She actually looked modest, dipping her chin and smiling that tight, practiced smile she used in her Instagram selfies. She reached out and squeezed Patrick's hand. Patrick, for his part, looked smug, taking a long sip of the expensive wine. "Oh, Daddy, stop," Mia cooed, her voice sugary sweet. "Family helps family, that's just what we do." "Not everyone," Andrew grunted, shooting another glare at me. "Some people just take." I felt my hands begin to shake beneath the tablecloth. I clamped them together, digging my fingernails into my palms until the sharp bite of pain grounded me. "Dad," I started, my voice trembling, "what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Scarlett," Andrew snapped. He sat down and aggressively unfolded his napkin. "Pass the potatoes, Mary." My mother avoided my eyes. She was serving the food with frantic energy, spooning heaps of mashed potatoes onto plates, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Let's just eat," she said, her voice high and brittle. "Everything is hot. Let's just have a nice meal." "I want to know what you mean," I insisted, the forensic accountant in me waking up. The part of me that hunted down missing assets and exposed corporate fraud was suddenly overriding the hurt daughter. "You said Mia is the reason you're afloat. You said I've done nothing." "Because it's true," Andrew slammed his fork down. "Mia has been paying the mortgage for the last 3 years. She's been paying the utilities. If it weren't for her and Patrick's success, we'd be on the street." I looked at Mia. She was busy cutting her turkey, avoiding my gaze entirely. She was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet I had never seen before. A Cartier love bracelet graced her other wrist. I did the mental math instantly. Roughly $10,000 of jewelry on a woman who, last I checked, was an aspiring lifestyle coach with 300 followers. "Mia paid the mortgage," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "Yes," Andrew said, "and don't look so jealous. Just because she's successful and generous doesn't mean you have to be bitter." "And the medical bills?" I asked, looking at my mother. "The surgery copays, the car repairs." "Mia," Andrew said firmly, "she covered it all." I looked at my mother. Mary was staring at her green beans as if they contained the secrets of the universe. She was sweating. A single bead of perspiration rolled down her temple, cutting through her foundation. "Mom," I asked softly, "is that true? Mia paid for everything." Mary dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Andrew, please, let's not talk about money at the table," she pleaded, her voice wobbling. "It's Thanksgiving." "I'm praising my daughter," Andrew argued. "Why shouldn't we talk about it? Scarlett needs to know what real responsibility looks like." I sat back in my chair. The nausea was gone, replaced by a cold, icy clarity. I watched them eat. I watched Mia accept the praise, feeding off it like a vampire. I watched Patrick smirk. I watched my father look at me with genuine disgust. They thought I was just the selfish, city-dwelling sister. They thought I was disconnected. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't just send cash. I didn't hand over envelopes of bills. I was a professional. I created paper trails for a living. Every single transfer, every memo line, every bank confirmation number was stored in a neatly organized folder on the encrypted cloud drive of my phone, which was currently sitting in my pocket. They were eating their turkey, unaware that the table was rigged to explode. To understand the magnitude of the rage currently simmering in my gut, you have to understand the last 3 years of my life. 3 years ago, my father had a heart attack. It forced him into early retirement. His pension was a fraction of what he expected because of some bad investments he'd made in the early 2000s, investments he never told my mother about until it was too late. They were facing foreclosure. I stepped in immediately. I was 29 then, just hitting my stride at the firm. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I sat them down at this very table and told them I would handle the shortfall. We agreed on $2,000 a month. That covered the mortgage gap, the insurance, and left a little buffer for groceries. For 36 months, that auto draft hit my account on the first of the month. Do you know what $2,000 a month looks like in your late 20s? It looks like driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a broken AC in the middle of July because you can't afford the repair. It looks like telling your friends no to the group trip to Cabo. It looks like meal prepping rice and beans while your colleagues go out to steak dinners. It looks like staying in a studio apartment the size of a show. E-box while your peers buy brownstones. I did it gladly. I did it because they were my parents. I did it because I loved them. And while I was eating ramen and working 80-hour weeks to fund their retirement, Mia was finding herself. Mia and Patrick, the golden couple. Mia had never held a job for longer than 6 months. She was a creative spirit. First, she was going to be a photographer. My parents bought her a $3,000 camera that now gathered dust. Then she was going to be a jewelry designer. They bought her the supplies. Now, she was a lifestyle influencer. She sat across from me now, waving her fork around. Honestly, she was saying to my dad, Patrick's crypto portfolio has just been exploding lately. That's how we were able to afford the new Range Rover. We just wanted to make sure you guys were taken care of first, obviously. Patrick nodded sagely. Patrick was a man whose profession was entirely nebulous. He called himself a serial entrepreneur. As far as I could tell, his business model involved sleeping until noon and borrowing money from anyone who stood still long enough. He was wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, the fabric shiny and cheap, but he wore a Rolex that looked suspiciously authentic. "You're a good man, Patrick," Andrew said, tearing into a roll. "Taking care of my girl, taking care of us." "We do what we can, Andrew," Patrick said, his voice oily. "Family first." I looked at Mia. "So the business is doing well then? The lifestyle coaching?" Mia's eyes flashed with annoyance. "It's a brand, Scarlett, and yes, we have sponsorships lined up, big ones." "Which sponsors?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "You wouldn't know them," she snapped. "They're high-end." "Right," I said. "And the mortgage payments, you make those directly to the bank." "Why are you grilling her?" Andrew slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Scarlett. You're jealous. You can't stand that your little sister is more successful than you." "I'm just curious, Dad," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Because foreclosure is serious business. I just want to make sure everything is handled correctly." "It is handled," Andrew spat, "by Mia, unlike you who hasn't sent a dime." There it was again, the direct accusation. I looked at my mother. She was staring at her plate, her face pale, her hands trembling so badly she had to put her fork down. She knew, she had to know. I sent the money to her account. We had discussed it every month on the phone. "Thanks for the help, honey," she would whisper before hanging up. So why was she letting Dad believe this lie? I looked at Mia. She was smirking at me, a nasty, triumphant little curl of her lip. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully rewritten history because I was the quiet one, the one who didn't brag, the one who just fixed things. She thought I was weak. She was about to find out that forensic accountant didn't just mean I was good at math. It meant I was good at hunting. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "You know," I said, unlocking the screen. "That's fascinating, Dad, because I'm looking at my bank statement right now." "Put the phone away, Scarlett," Andrew barked, his face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. "I will not have you disrespecting your sister and her husband with your petty jealousy. Not at this table. Not on Thanksgiving." I didn't put the phone away. I didn't even look up. My thumb was hovering over the biometric login for my primary banking app, but my mind was already racing 3 steps ahead. In my line of work, we have a saying, emotion is the enemy of evidence. If you get angry, you get sloppy. If you get sloppy, the money disappears. I forced my heart rate to slow. I forced the heat in my cheeks to cool. I engaged the part of my brain that I used when I was sitting across from CEOs who were trying to explain why $20 million had vanished into a shell company in the Caymans. "I'm not being jealous, Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was terrifyingly calm. "I'm being thorough. You said Mia paid the mortgage. You said she paid the utilities. You said I've done nothing." "Because it's true," Mia interjected, her voice pitching higher. She dropped her fork, the metal clattering against the fine china. "God, why do you always have to make everything about you? Why can't you just be happy that we're doing well?" "I would be thrilled if you were doing well, Mia," I said, finally looking up. I locked eyes with her. She flinched. "But here's the thing about forensic accounting. It's not about stories, it's about math, and math doesn't have feelings. Math doesn't lie." I tapped the screen. The app opened. "Mom," I said, shifting my gaze to Mary. She was literally shaking now, her hands gripped so tightly around her wine glass that her knuckles were white. She looked like a trapped animal. 3 years ago, we set up a joint checking account at Chase. Do you remember? It was specifically to handle the transfers so Dad wouldn't have to worry about the logistics. I don't know," Mary stammered, her eyes darting between Andrew and Mia. "I don't remember." "I do," I said, "because I'm looking at the statements right now. November 1st. Outgoing transfer, $2,000. Recipient, Mary and Andrew joint checking. Memo, Mom and Dad home." I scrolled back. October 1st, same amount, same memo. September 1st, same amount, same memo. I turned the phone around, holding it up so Andrew could see the screen. The bright white light of the display cut through the dim, candle-lit ambience of the dining room. "Dad," I said, "look at the sender." Andrew squinted. He didn't want to look. Looking meant admitting that his narrative, the one where his golden child was the savior and I was the villain, was flawed. But the numbers were right there, stark black text on a white background. "That doesn't prove anything," Patrick spoke up, his mouth full of turkey. He waved a dismissive hand, the heavy gold watch on his wrist catching the light. "Anyone can Photoshop a screenshot, Scarlett. It's sad, really, that you'd go to these lengths." "It's a live app, Patrick," I said, swiping the screen to refresh the balance. The little loading wheels spun and updated. "See, live data." "So you sent Mom some cash," Mia scoffed, rolling her eyes. She took a sip of wine, but her hand was trembling so much the red liquid sloshed against the rim. "Big deal. Maybe you were paying her back for all the money they spent on your college tuition, or maybe it was a loan repayment. That doesn't mean you're supporting the household." "A loan repayment?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I went to state school on a scholarship, Mia. You went to private art school for 4 years, which Dad paid for by refinancing the house. The same house that was about to be foreclosed on 3 years ago." I looked at my father. "Dad, tell me something. How exactly does Mia pay the mortgage?" She handles it," Andrew said, his voice less booming now, laced with a sudden, creeping uncertainty. "She gives the money to your mother, and your mother pays the bank." "Cash?" I asked. "No," Andrew frowned. "Transfers from her business accounts." "Okay," I nodded. "So, if I log into the Chase account, the one Mom and I share, I should see incoming transfers from Mia, right? Thousands of dollars a month." The silence that stretched across the table was heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. "Don't you dare," Mia hissed. Her face had lost its color. The carefully applied blush stood out starkly against her sudden pallor. "You don't have the right to look at Mom's private banking." "It's a joint account, Mia. My name is on it. I have every right." I tapped the button to switch accounts. I wasn't just investigating anymore. I was executing a search warrant in real time. I navigated to the deposits tab of the joint account. The little wheel spun again. This was the moment. The data loaded. I scanned the last 6 months of activity. My eyes moved down the columns, processing the information faster than I could speak it. November 1st, deposit $2,000 source, Scarlett. October 1st, deposit $2,000 source, Scarlett. I looked for Mia's name. I looked for Patrick's name. I looked for Lifestyle Ventures LLC or whatever shell company they were pretending to run. Nothing. That's strange, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. I'm looking at the deposits for the last year. I see my transfers, like clockwork, but Dad, I don't see a single dime from Mia. Let me see that. Andrew snatched the phone from my hand. He held it close to his face, his brows furrowed. He scrolled up. He scrolled down. It's technical, Mia shrieked, jumping to her feet. We use a different transfer protocol. It's crypto-backed. It doesn't show up as a standard deposit immediately. It clears through a third-party vendor. Crypto-backed transfer protocols don't make invisible deposits, Mia, I said, staring her down. Money is either in the account or it isn't. And according to this, the only money coming into this house to pay the bills is mine. Mary, Andrew lowered the phone. He looked at his wife. He looked older suddenly, the bluster draining out of him, replaced by a confused fear. Mary, what is this? Where is Mia's money? My mother burst into tears. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was a wailing sob, the kind that comes from years of holding back a dam of lies. She buried her face in her napkin, her shoulders heaving. I couldn't tell you, she sobbed. I couldn't. Couldn't tell me what? Andrew demanded, his voice rising again. That Mia isn't helping. She is, Mary cried, looking up, her eyes red and desperate. She reached out and grabbed Mia's hand. Mia tries, she tries so hard, but the business, it takes time to build. She needed help, Andrew. She needed confidence. So you lied, Andrew whispered. You told me she was paying the mortgage. I wanted you to be proud of her, Mary wailed. You're always so hard on her. I just wanted you to look at her the way you used to look at Scarlett. I wanted us to be a happy family. By taking my money, I interrupted, my voice cold, and putting Mia's name on it. It's all money, Mary snapped at me, suddenly angry, deflecting her shame into rage. What does it matter who sent it? It all goes to the same pot. We're a family. Why do you have to be so obsession with credit? You have a good job, Scarlett. You can afford it. Mia needs the support. I can afford it, I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. Mom, I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I drive a car with 180,000 miles on it. I live in a studio apartment. I sent you that money so you wouldn't lose the house. I didn't send it so Mia could play rich girl and buy Cartier bracelets while I eat instant oatmeal. You selfish *TCH, Patrick spat. He stood up now, looming over the table. He was trying to be physically intimidating, puffing out his chest. You come in here, waving your little phone around, making your mother cry. You think you're so smart? You don't know the first thing about our finances. Oh, I think I do, I said, standing up to meet him. I wasn't tall, but I was furious, and that gave me inches. Because here's the second question, Patrick. If Mia isn't putting money in, why are there withdrawals coming out? I had seen it when I scrolled past the deposits. What? Andrew asked, his head snapping back to the phone he was still holding. Look at the withdrawals, Dad, I instructed. Look at the payments, not the mortgage, the other ones. Andrew looked down. He tapped the screen with a trembling finger. Venmo, he read. Venmo to, at Mia Style, $500, November 3rd. Venmo to at Mia Style, $800, November 10th. Cash withdrawal, $400. He looked up, his face gray. Mary, what is this? She needed inventory, Mary sobbed. For the brand, you have to spend money to make money, Andrew, you know that. So, I stepped away from the table, pacing the small room. Let me get this straight. I send $2,000 to keep the roof over your heads. Mom takes that money, gives half of it to Mia for inventory and brand building, and then, what? What happens to the mortgage, Mom? It gets paid, Mia yelled. It gets paid. Stop acting like we're criminals. Does it? I asked. Because if $1,300 went to Mia this month, and the mortgage is $1,600, the math doesn't work. I turned to my father. Dad, give me the phone. He handed it to me. He looked broken, but Mia wasn't done. She was cornered, and cornered narcissists attack. You're lying, Mia screamed. You hacked the app. You're just trying to ruin my Thanksgiving because you're a lonely, miserable workaholic who no one loves. That's why you're single, Scarlett. That's why you're alone, because you're toxic. I'm checking the mortgage portal, I said, ignoring her completely. I typed in the URL for the mortgage lender. I knew the password. I had set it up for them 3 years ago when I started the payments. Don't you dare, Mia lunged for me. I sidestepped her easily. She stumbled into the sideboard, knocking over a vase of dried flowers. The page loaded. I stared at the screen. My stomach dropped. It was worse than I thought. Oh my God, I whispered. The room went silent. Even Mia stopped her theatrics, panting heavily, her hair disheveled. What? Andrew asked. Scarlett, what is it? Dad, I said, looking at him with genuine pity. When was the last time you saw a mortgage statement, a physical one? I don't know, he rubbed his face. Mary handles the mail, she said we were paperless now. We are paperless, I said, which is why you didn't see the foreclosure notice. Foreclosure, the word came out of his mouth like a strangled gasp. You're 3 months behind, I said, reading the bright red text on the screen. Status, pre-foreclosure. Amount needed to reinstate, $5,800. Last payment received, July. I looked at my mother. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the wall, catatonic. She had dissociated. The reality of what she had done, enabling Mia to the point of destroying their lives, was too much for her to process. No, Andrew whispered. No, that's impossible, Mia said. Mia said she paid it off. She said she made a lump sum payment in August with her crypto earnings. I turned to Mia. She was backing away toward the door, clutching her Louis Vuitton bag, a bag that I now realized was probably bought with the mortgage money. Mia, I said, my voice hard, where is the money? It's coming, Mia blurted out, her eyes wide and manic. The investment needs time to em. Patrick said it's locked in a high-yield staking pool. We can't touch it for 90 days or we lose the interest. I told Mom. I told her to just float us for a few months until the big payout comes. You told her to stop paying the mortgage, Andrew roared. It was a sound I had never heard him make, a primal, wounded bellow. I told her it was an investment, Mia screamed back. We were going to pay off the whole house in January. We were doing this for you. You stole the money, I corrected. I sent $2,000 every month. That money was specifically for the house. You took it. You spent it on. What? Purses, dinners, this trip. We're building a brand, Patrick shouted, stepping in front of Mia. You don't understand leverage. We needed to look successful to attract investors. It's marketing. You spent your parents' housing security on marketing? I asked, incredulous. You let them fall into foreclosure so you could look rich on Instagram. It's not stealing, Patrick argued. It's a reallocation of family assets. It's fraud, I said, and it's elder abuse. I looked at the mortgage portal again. I tapped on the payment history. And it gets better, I said, feeling the cold, hard anger crystallizing in my chest. Or worse. Dad, look at the payment source for the payments that were made earlier this year. I walked over to him and showed him the screen. Payment from Patrick and Mia joint. No, wait, that's returned for insufficient funds. I scrolled down. Here, payment from Discover Card. They paid the mortgage with a credit card, Andrew asked, his voice shaking. No, I said, they paid the mortgage with your credit card. I don't have a Discover card, Andrew said. Apparently you do, I said. Mom, did you open a card in Dad's name? Mary didn't answer. She just rocked back and forth in her chair. Mia, I said, turning to my sister, did you open a card in Dad's name? Mom said it was okay, Mia cried. She signed the papers. We needed it to improve his credit score. We maxed it out to show utilization and then we were going to pay it off. It's a strategy. A strategy? I asked. It's identity theft. How much is on the card, Mia? I don't know, she mumbled, looking at the floor. I can find out, I said. I can pull Dad's credit report right now. Do you want me to do that? Or do you want to tell the truth for the first time in your life? Mia looked at Patrick. Patrick looked at the door. They were calculating. They were wondering if they could run. 30,000, Patrick muttered. 30,000? Andrew gripped the edge of the table. He looked like he was going to have another heart attack. It was for the business, Mia insisted. And the wedding, we wanted you to have a nice wedding for us, Daddy. You always promised me a big wedding. So you stole his identity and put him in debt to pay for your own party, I asked. We were going to pay it back, Mia shrieked. Why don't you believe us? We're rich, we have assets. If you have assets, I said, crossing my arms, then pay the $5,800 right now. Reinstate the mortgage. Log into your bank right here and make the transfer. Mia froze. Patrick looked at his shoes. We can't, Patrick said quietly. It's illiquid. It's gone, I translated. It never existed. You're broke, you're living off my parents, and you're bleeding them dry. I turned to my father. He was staring at Mia, the daughter he had worshipped, the daughter he had praised just 20 minutes ago as the savior of the family. He looked at the expensive clothes she was wearing, the jewelry, the designer bag. And then he looked at me. The daughter he had called shameful. The daughter he had accused of doing nothing. Scarlett, he rasped, fix this, please. I can't fix this with a check, Dad, I said, my voice trembling slightly. This isn't just about money anymore. This is a crime scene. Don't say that, Mary suddenly snapped out of her trance. Don't you dare call the police on your sister. She's family. She's a predator, Mom, I said, and you're the getaway driver. Get out, Mia hissed at me. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Get out of our house. You've done enough damage. It's not your house, I said calmly. It's the bank's house, and in about 30 days, it's going to be the sheriff's house. I looked at the chaos around the table. The congealing turkey, the spilled wine, the shattered family. I had the truth. I had the leverage. But the final blow hadn't landed yet. I needed to ensure that Mia and Patrick couldn't worm their way back in. I needed to make sure the crypto lie was buried so deep it could never be resurrected. I'm not leaving, I said. Not until we pull up Patrick's investment portfolio. You can't, Patrick said quickly. It's on a hardware wallet. It's at home. No problem, I said, reaching for my purse. My laptop is in the car, and I have a subscription to a blockchain forensic analysis tool. If you give me your public wallet address, which you surely have memorized, being such a big investor, I can verify your holdings in about 30 seconds. Patrick turned pale, paler than the tablecloth. He stammered. Or, I said, you can admit right now that the money doesn't exist, that you're unemployed, and that you've been stealing from 2 pensioners to fund your cosplay of a rich life. The silence returned, but this time it was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging in the air. The silence in the dining room wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, packed with the dense, dark matter of ruined expectations. Patrick stood there, his face glistening with sweat, his eyes darting toward the hallway like a trapped rodent looking for a gap in the baseboards. I'm waiting, I said, my voice steady, though my insides were vibrating with adrenaline. The wallet address, Patrick, or the truth, pick one. You're being ridiculous, Patrick stammered, trying to muster a laugh that came out as a wet, panicked cough. I'm not giving you my private keys. That's Security 101. You think I'm stupid. I don't need your private keys, I corrected him, stepping closer. I need your public address, the one you use to receive funds. That's public information. If you were a real investor, you'd know that. Patrick looked at Mia. Mia looked at the floor. The power couple facade was melting like wax under a blowtorch. He lost the password. Mia suddenly blurted out, her voice shrill and desperate. That's why we haven't paid. He got locked out of the account last month. We're working with support to get it back. That's the only reason. Stop it, Andrew said. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, guttural rumble that seemed to come from the basement of the house. My father was staring at the table, his hands gripping the edge so hard his knuckles looked like polished bone. Andrew, please, Mary whispered, reaching for his arm. They made a mistake. They're young. We can fix this. I said stop it, Andrew roared, slamming his fist onto the table. The china jumped. A wine glass tipped over, spilling a blood-red stain across the white lace tablecloth. Stop lying to me. For God's sake, Mary, stop treating me like an idiot. He turned his gaze slowly, painfully, toward Patrick. There is no money, is there? Patrick opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Mia, then back at Andrew. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic, shivering reality of a man who had never worked a hard day in his life. We had bad luck, Patrick mumbled, his voice barely audible. The market crashed. It wasn't my fault. It was the algorithm. The algorithm, Andrew repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. You gambled away my retirement on an algorithm. I was trying to double it. Patrick yelled, suddenly defensive. I was trying to help. You think it's easy? You think I wanted to be in this position? If Scarlett hadn't come here with her little spreadsheets, we would have been fine. I would have made it back. So it's my fault, I asked, incredulous. I'm the villain because I caught you. Yes, Mia screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You ruined everything. You always do. You couldn't just leave us alone. You couldn't just let us have one nice dinner. You had to be the hero. I am the hero, I shouted back, finally losing my composure. I am the only person in this room who has actually put food on this table. I am the only reason the lights are on. I am the only reason you aren't eating Thanksgiving dinner in a homeless shelter. I turned to my father. Dad, they didn't just lose the money, they stole it. They took the cash I sent for the mortgage and spent it on themselves. They took out a credit card in your name and maxed it out. This isn't bad luck. This is theft. This is prison time. Andrew stood up. He looked shaky, old, and incredibly tired. He walked over to where Mia was sitting. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, expecting him to comfort her, expecting the usual pattern where she cried and he fixed it. Daddy, she whimpered, reaching out a hand. I'm sorry, I wanted to be like you. I wanted to be successful. Andrew looked at her hand. He didn't take it. You aren't successful, Mia, he said, his voice cracking. You're a thief. Mia flinched as if he had slapped her. And you, Andrew turned to Patrick, you're a parasite. Now hold on a second. Patrick started to bristle, stepping forward. Get out, Andrew said. What? Patrick blinked. Get out of my house, Andrew said, louder this time. Pack your bags, pack your inventory, and get out tonight. Dad, you can't be serious, Mia shrieked. Where are we supposed to go? We gave up our apartment. We have nowhere to go. Go to a hotel, Andrew said. Use the Discover card. Oh, wait, you maxed it out. Mom, Mia turned to Mary, screaming now. Mom, do something. He's kicking us out. It's Thanksgiving. And then my mother started screaming. It wasn't a scream of defense. It wasn't a scream of anger at me. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated panic. The enabler's world was collapsing, and she couldn't handle the debris. You can't do this, Mary shrieked, grabbing Andrew's lapels, shaking him. There are babies. Andrew, you can't. It's too cold. It's too late. They'll die out there. They are 30 years old, Mary, Andrew yelled back, pushing her hands away. They are adults, and they have robbed us blind. They looked me in the eye and lied to me for 3 years while Scarlett paid for the roof over our heads, and I sat here and insulted her. I insulted the only daughter who actually gives a damn about us. He looked at me then. His eyes were wet. I'm sorry, Scarlett, he whispered. God, I am so sorry. That was the moment the dam broke. Not for me, but for Mia. Seeing Dad apologize to me, actually apologize, broke something fundamental in her brain. She grabbed the centerpiece, the expensive floral arrangement she had probably bought with my money, and hurled it at the wall. "I hate you," she screamed at me. "I hate you. You think you're so perfect. You think you're better than us just because you have a job, you're boring, you're a soulless corporate drone, you have nothing." "I have a house," I said calmly. "And I have a clean criminal record. And I have $2,000 a month that is no longer going into your pocket." "Get out," Andrew bellowed, pointing at the door with a trembling finger. "Now, before I call the police." Patrick grabbed Mia's arm. He saw the writing on the wall. He knew that Andrew was 1 second away from violence or a heart attack, and neither would end well for him. "Come on, Mia," Patrick muttered, dragging her toward the hallway. "Let's go, we don't need them, we don't need their charity." "My bags," Mia screamed, fighting him. "My clothes." "Leave them," Andrew shouted. "I'll put them on the curb tomorrow, just get out of my sight." We watched them stumble out the front door, a chaotic mess of limbs and accusations. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them, shaking the frames on the walls. The silence that followed was absolute. For a long time, no one moved. My mother collapsed into her chair, sobbing quietly into her hands. My father stood by the door, staring at the wood grain as if expecting it to provide answers to the questions that were tearing him apart. I sat back down. I picked up my fork. My hand was shaking, but I forced myself to take a bite of the now cold stuffing. "Dad," I said softly, "come sit down." He turned slowly. He looked 10 years older than he had when I walked in an hour ago. He walked to the table and sank into his chair. He didn't look at Mary. He looked at me. "Is it true," he asked, his voice raspy, "about the foreclosure?" "Yes," I said, "but it's fixable. I can pay the arrears tomorrow. I have the savings." "You shouldn't have to," he said, shaking his head. "You shouldn't have to pay for any of this." "I know," I said, "but I will, on one condition." He looked up. "Anything." "I take over the finances," I said. "Legally, I want power of attorney over the house and the accounts until the debt is cleared. No more secrets. No more Mary handles it. I see everything. I pay the bills directly. No cash touches anyone's hands." I looked at my mother. She was still crying, but she was listening. "And Mom," I said, my voice firm, "if you ever give Mia money behind my back again, if you ever slip her a 20 or pay a bill for her or buy her inventory, I walk away. The house goes to the bank, the electricity gets cut, and I go back to the city and I never look back. Do you understand?" Mary sniffled, wiping her eyes with the napkin. She looked small. The power she had held as the gatekeeper of the family secrets was gone. "I understand," she whispered. I didn't want them to fail." "They failed because you wouldn't let them struggle," I said. "You crippled them with kindness, Mom, and you almost took Dad down with them." We spent the rest of the evening not eating, but working. I pulled out my laptop. I ran a full credit check on both of my parents. It was a bloodbath. The Discover card wasn't $30,000. It was $42,000. There was also a personal line of credit at a local bank that was overdrawn by $5,000. In total, Mia and Patrick had siphoned nearly $80,000 from my parents in 3 years, on top of the $72,000 I had sent. Over $150,000. Gone. Wasted on leases for cars they couldn't afford, designer clothes, trips to networking events that were just parties, and a facade of success that was hollow to the core. "We have to file a police report," I said, looking at the numbers. "To clear the debt on the credit cards, we have to claim identity theft. That means filing charges against Mia and Patrick." "Scarlett," Mary started, her voice pleading. "Do it," Andrew said. His voice was hard, resolute. "File it." "Dad, that's a felony," I warned him. "They will go to jail." "They stole from this family," Andrew said, staring at the screen. "They looked me in the face and smiled while they cut my legs out from under me. If they have to learn the hard way, then they learn the hard way." I filed the report online that night. The next few months were a blur of legal meetings, bank appointments, and forensic restructuring. I didn't just fix their finances, I fortified them. I set up a trust for the house so it couldn't be leveraged again. I consolidated their debt. I put them on a strict budget. Mia and Patrick didn't go to prison, but only because I cut a deal. I agreed not to pursue the full extent of the fraud charges if they agreed to a binding repayment plan and a permanent restraining order regarding my parents' financial assets. They refused at first. Then I showed their lawyer the blockchain evidence I had, proof that Patrick had indeed taken investor money from a few of his friends and lost it. That was wire fraud. That was federal. They signed the deal the next day. Their marriage didn't last the winter. Once the money dried up and the delusions of grandeur were shattered, they turned on each other with vicious intensity. Patrick moved back in with his mother in Ohio. Mia is currently working as a receptionist at a dental office. She still posts on Instagram sometimes, but it's mostly photos of her cat. The lifestyle brand is dead. As for me, I visited my parents last week. The house is safe. The mortgage is current. The paint I paid for looks good. We sat on the porch, drinking iced tea. It was quiet. "I'm proud of you, Scarlett," my dad said out of nowhere. He didn't look at me, he was watching a cardinal land on the feeder. I don't say it enough, I was blinded by, I don't know, the flash, the noise, but you're the solid ground you always were. I reached out and took his hand. It felt rough, weathered, but real. "Thanks, Dad," I said. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need a toast. I just needed the truth. And as I drove back to the city that night, watching the skyline rise up to meet me, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't driving away from my problems. I had solved them. I had balanced the ledger, and finally I was in the black.